The cool but surprisingly dry air caressed my face as I walked the tunnel underneath the tower. It amazed me how the architecture kept the archive at the right temperature and moisture levels to conserve the many scrolls and books perfectly. The archive was even older than the tower above, dating from a time before the council even existed. Rumors told of a monastery that once stood on top of the archive. Considering the ancient architecture that was completely different from the tower, the rumors might as well be true. The tunnel was carved out from the sandstone and was decorated with a frieze on either side depicting mythical creatures. I often stopped to study the ancient symbols and elegant dragons, however, tonight I was somewhat in a hurry. Nighttime was my favorite time to visit the archives because it was really quiet at that time. Not many people were night owls like me. My footsteps echoed through the arched tunnel, the light from the walls conscious creating strange shadows as I passed them. Hopefully, only one archivist would be on watch tonight. That would make my job so much easier. I often had to file my reports in the archive, so it would be no surprise that I showed up there. Even the late hour of my appearance was nothing strange. Everyone knew I liked to work when the moon and stars were out. However, today I had a slightly more secret reason to be here. I knew it wasn't exactly okay to pry into things that weren't mine. However, the nagging feeling in my gut kept me awake at night, and I just had to know more. Oh, this curiosity of mine would be the death of me. I still wasn't quite sure whether I should do this. It was not my method to go snooping around and search for information on a particular person. However, the werewolf's words kept going through my head. He wanted to turn her into the council. This meant he somehow knew she was wanted. No, I had to do something before disaster struck, and although this was not a method that I resorted to often, I knew in my heart it was the only chance I had if I wanted to prevent anything worse. I had to check it for myself and see the details of the case. There could be vital information that could help me save her from deportation or worse. A pang of fear gripped my heart, making me gasp. What if I couldn't save her? Just like the others that disappeared. Somehow with her, the prospect of deportation was even more horrendous. No matter how much I tried to keep things professional, I couldn't fool my heart. I was afraid of losing her. What did that mean? That I liked her? Once again, I wished I could speak with my father. He was onto something. I just had to figure out what. I let out a frustrated sigh. As a magical investigator, I had no access to the restricted files. I was just someone who would file his reports and was allowed only in the common archive. Only high authority figures were allowed in the restricted archive, such as agents. The restricted files were being kept in the back of the archive, locked behind an iron gate. One could only guess what secrets were being kept there. Probably a lot of awful stuff. I reached the oak door at the end of the tunnel and peered through the small windows. Great, only Byrne was on watch today. I clamped my reports under my arm, making sure I didn't spill the steaming cup of coffee. I straightened my shoulders and took a deep breath. This was it. I was really going to do this. I opened one of the doors, the wood rough beneath my hand, and gave Byrne a big smile. Hello, Byrne. Still on the job, I see? The scent of aged parchment hung in the still air. The silence in the archive always baffled me. It was as if you entered a whole different world. Byrne looked at me, his round face beaming and showing his crooked teeth when he grinned. His graying hair covered only the back of his head, leaving the front bare and shiny like a mirror. I felt a pang of guilt as I thought about what I was going to do. Byrne's desk was littered with books and manuscripts. He was probably still working on the new labeling system, a long and tedious job. Hello, Mason, he replied jovially, his voice surprisingly high. Yes, I am burning the midnight oil, as you can see. Unending chores, he chuckled. his red cheeks bulging as his lips turned up. I figured as much. I got you a nice cup of coffee, I beamed as I put the mug in front of him. Byrne was a good man, and I hated the fact that I had to betray his trust like this. I waved my papers at him and made my way to my usual spot, the simple oak table between tall bookshelves. There was a chandelier above it, so it was easier to file my reports. I came here at least once a week, mostly in the evening. Byrne nodded and lifted the mug to me in a silent salute. As he drank a sip of his coffee, he let out a content sigh. If only he knew. From the corner of my eyes, I could see him bending over his papers again. A jolt of nervousness went through me. I sure hoped this wouldn't backfire. I sat down on the simple oak chair and began filing the report about the train station. Meanwhile, I kept my eye on Byrne, who was now yawning profusely. A short while later, I was startled as I heard a loud thud. I looked over at Byrne and saw he was fast asleep, his head on his papers, his hands still clutching a manuscript. I sure hope he wouldn't have a headache afterward. It was only after I heard him snoring that I dared breathe again. It seemed like he was indeed sleeping deeply. I would have to hurry before the sleep powder wore off. I left my papers on the table and carefully I made my way to Byrne's desk, pausing to make sure he was still asleep before I bent over the desk to search for his keys. There they were, dangling from the drawer in his desk. Seeing as Byrne was hanging over his desk, there was only a very small gap between his protruding belly and the keys. This could get tricky. I steeled myself and reached out, careful not to touch him. Oh, how I wish I could just use my magic. However, that would certainly sound the alarm. The tower and the archive underneath were no magic zone. Any use of magical energy would be detected by the protective shield surrounding it. I grabbed the keys, surrounding them with my hand so they wouldn't jingle, and pulled. Damn, they were stuck. I tried to calm myself before pulling slightly harder. They were really stuck. Suddenly, the keys shot out of the lock, making me fall onto the desk, and my fist collided with Byrne's stomach. I instantly froze. I even held my breath as Byrne mumbled and shifted in his chair. For a heartbeat, I was sure he was going to wake up. This was it. I was going to get caught. A tense moment later, I let out a relieved sigh as Byrne started snoring again, and I was able to get off the desk, keys firmly grasped in my hand. I quickly made my way to the restricted area in the back. The gate was easily unlocked with Byrne's keys, and I slipped inside. There were several cabinets here, tall ones with many drawers. Each drawer was marked with a handwritten label. After scanning the cabinets, I found the drawer I was looking for, Wanted Individuals. I pulled out the filing cabinet, cringing when it made a scraping noise. I looked at Byrne, who was mumbling something in his sleep. I wasn't sure how long the sleep powder would work. It seemed to have somewhat of a random effect on certain people, and there was a chance of someone suddenly walking into the archive. I shook my head. I had to concentrate. Quickly, I flicked through the files, scanning the names on the papers. I wasn't even sure I would find anything. Maybe I was wasting my time here. The papers were pretty official, with a stamp of the council on each of them. And there were many of them. I wondered whether these were all real criminals or just inconveniences for the council that they tried to remove. But then, one name I was looking for appeared. Jane Woodrow, the mystery that kept eluding me. I took out the file. Immediately, I noticed the personal stamp of Councillor Greystone. Why would Brandon have an interest in Jane? Was it just a coincidence, or was there more to the story? Brandon was the one who recently pushed a new law through the council, a law that was controversial and highly objected to by the rest of the council. However, he managed to push it through in a very suspicious, timely manner. Previously, it was no crime to be a wild witch. Now, being a witch could be punished by deportation just like illness, homelessness, and being cursed was. Why would Brandon make a point of deporting wild witches? Did he perhaps have a personal interest in seeing Jane gone? I perused the file some more and discovered Jane apparently attended Esom, the Esholm School of Magic. I knew she was a witch. However, it also stated that she left the same school before finishing it. The reason for her leaving was confidential. How odd. The decision to leave the magic school could not have been easy, seeing as it took a considerable amount of money to enroll. What could have made her drop out? I wish she told me more and answered my questions. This didn't make sense. This made the situation infinitely more complicated. A deep worry nestled itself in my stomach. This girl was knee-deep in trouble. If only I had more to go on. What was this connection between Jane and Brandon? I almost dropped the file as a sound behind me startled me. Byrne was turning in his chair, about to wake up. I quickly returned the file to where it belonged and closed the drawer as silently as possible. Tiptoeing back to Byrne and sliding the keys back into his drawer. Luckily, putting them back into the lock went smoother than removing them. I made it back to the oak table just in time to see Byrne rubbing his eyes. That was a close one. Apparently, sleep powder did indeed wear off pretty quickly. There was no other option than to visit Esom and ask around. I cringed at the thought. I would rather not visit that puffed-up headmistress of theirs. Resigned, I turned in my report to the still sleepy-looking Byrne and bid him farewell. It seemed I had some more digging to do, for this mystery kept getting deeper and deeper.